Here we are, final day of the anniversary 7 buff breakdowns, which is also day 7. And I have to say, I was expecting something more grand, more exciting for the days, the last day, but sadly, in my opinion, these buffs are not very exciting. And also, excuse me if you hear the dog on the background. He's on a mood today, so hopefully it's not too audible. Now, the buffs for today, for the 4-star Saber, we have Lancelot Saber with an MP upgrade, and for the 1-star Berserker, it's Paul Bunyan, the good old welfare, also an MP upgrade. So, let's immediately tackle on Mr. NTR. What do we got? So, this is the first buff he's ever received, because honestly, he's always been a very solid, like a DPS anyway. So, it's not like he ever needed a buff desperately. Even if nowadays he's not like a top tier DPS or anything, but still. Before this buff, it was just okay. You get an 30% arts up for 1 turn before damage. That's the real important part. If this wasn't here, this MP would be terrible. It was just terrible, but at least this made it pretty decent. Now, the OC, though, sucks. It just flat out sucks. It's not as bad as like a dot, but it's not much better. So, in case people don't know how this works, it's a really interesting case. It's not a defense down on the enemy for 5 turns. It's an increased damage taken for 5 turns. Now, if you don't know how this thing works, this is basically like a divinity effect, which is bonus damage, but in the form of a debuff. And that's bad. What this means is that it's not making the target take like a percentage increased damage like a defense down would, which would be way better. This is a flat damage taken increase, and the amount is literally there. So on base 100% OC, your hits on the opponent for the next 5 turns after this MP would deal an additional 1000 damage. And of course, he's a boss killer, which in bosses it makes even a less of a difference than in farming would, and even there it wouldn't be great. It's just weak sauce is what it is. Like, obviously you can still stack it as well, because his MP tends to be fairly spammable, but even then, it's weak is what it is. Now let's see what they did with the buff. First of all, standard damage upgrade, and then they buffed the OC. They doubled the values. So it's now a 2k base increased damage taken instead of 1k. In my opinion, nothing changes for this. So in terms of the OC, forget about it. Even if you like MP like 5 turns in a row for like 10k extra damage taken on attacks, at that point you might see a small difference, obviously, but even like it's just not good. Like a defense down would be so much better. Even a 10% defense down would be so much better than this. But luckily, that's not the only thing they did, because they also made it that his MP now ignores defense, which is good. It's a nice utility to have. So I have very mixed feelings about this, because I think the OC itself, again, pretty useless. But the damage upgrade is nice, and the added the ignore defense is also nice. But that's it. Will this really change much? For a lot of these buffs, I don't really see this changing too much, personally. He's mostly still gonna work the same, albeit his MP will do a bit more damage, but that's really it. I was hoping for something cool, something new. I mean, obviously the defense ignore is new, but because it's still a niche, let's be real. It's not gonna be an effect, like a thing that works in every boss anyway. Now, in terms of the Saber tier list, sadly it doesn't save my previous placements, but I did place all the stuff that I had for the 4-star single target art Sabers. This is according to my tier list, and I ranked them all basically the same, right? Minus Summer Maeve, who probably could have used this buff a bit more if they wanted to buff one of these. So I'm not even sure if I'll even bump him up from this, honestly. Is he worth an A+ now instead of an A? Is he above the others? I don't know. I really don't know. I might leave him in the same tier still. I still think he's a good unit for sure, but I don't think this is even like a plus. Just a bit more damage for MP, and sometimes you have a useful utility. That's it. So this one, I don't think I'll move it at all. I still think most of the 4-star single target art Sabers are fairly interchangeable, so I don't think this will really make him like, oh, he's the best now, like you should pick him. So I don't think so. So I'll just leave it at that. A pretty boring buff that won't really change too much, but hey, I guess he is still better. Alright, let's get into the second buff then. So I myself predicted it was going to be Asterius because he still has a basic monster strength. They could have given him like a battery or something to make getting to his MP easier, because his MP really is a unique case, which is a cool part. I was maybe hoping to actually see a battery for once, but no. They buff Bunyan instead, and it's an MP buff. So let's see what we're working with here. Now, fair warning, if you thought the previous buff was boring, this is even more boring, because this literally adds nothing new. Nothing. This is like a year 1 buff almost, which is pretty disappointing in the year 2022, 7 years into the game. They're gonna buff an MP and add nothing new. So it comes with the standard damage upgrade, and then they also buff the OC values from 10% base defense down for a solid 5 turns. It's still the same though, so again, it wasn't like it was 3 turns before, it's still 5 turns. But yes, now 20% 5 turns, even if it's after damage, it's solid for an OC, but she's mostly used for farming anyway, so I don't think it's going to be even that relevant for the OC buff. And it's so sad to see a buffed MP in the year 2022 that has no normal effects besides damage. It's just a sad thing to see, honestly. Even if she's a 1-star, and honestly, I couldn't expect anything crazy to begin with, because again, 1-star, and also not even a permanent one. Then you can also make the argument that why did they buff her in the first place? If they weren't going to do something cool and something like actually that will make a big difference or something, they could have just buffed Asterius instead or something. I just don't really understand. Obviously, she's also better from this, but man, this is not a modern buff in my opinion. It's a very boring. This is the most boring buff. Now, in the Berserker tier list, I had her on a B, still a full tier below Spartacus, and even with this, I don't think she will match Spartacus because he at least has the batteries. Or battery to be able to do some actual better farming, but maybe in this case I could still bump her to B+, like not like with Lancelot where I didn't move him at all. I can maybe see the argument of placing Bunyan in B+ now. I still in most cases would recommend Spartacus over her, so I'm still gonna place him higher or leave him higher, but yeah, again, a minimal difference is what it is. This one, I can just barely give the plus, I suppose, because her damage wasn't high to begin with, so the damage upgrade still helps, I suppose. Maybe even also a B, like I said, so just a very small buff, if anything. Kinda disappointed with today's buffs, especially when it's the last day. It's just very disappointing to me. And I guess there's no even, like, predictions for tomorrow anymore, because this is the last day, so I'll just give my fast recap here, and we're basically done here. So for Lancelot, I am fairly disappointed with the buff. At least the new niche with the ignore defense is nice, but the OC still remains to be very weak. And this really won't change too much. He's still mostly interchangeable with the other 4-star single target art Sabers in my opinion. And as for the Bunyan buff, she does more damage now, which is nice because 1-star stats suck anyway. So the MP buff obviously helps, but otherwise, she's basically the same. And just a very disappointing buff. They really should have added something like a new normal effect or something as well, or just given the buff to Asterios or whatever. So with that, that's the episode of Buff Breakdown. A very sad squeak to end this Anniversary 7 buffs, and I guess as a whole I could comment that I like most of the buffs that we got on this anniversary, but I don't think this is like even close to being the best set of anniversary buffs we've seen across all of them, so I was expecting a bit more overall, but there were some buffs that I'm still obviously very much in love with, so it wasn't all bad. So who knows when the next episode of Buff Breakdown is happening, possibly with the release of the new summer event next week maybe even, who knows, and if there's new buffs I'll be there. Copium for Summer Abigail if anything. So there you go. If you enjoyed this last episode of Anniversary 7 Buff Breakdowns, do me a solid and press the thumbs up button, really helps out. And stay subscribed, because obviously there's going to be a lot of videos in the future as well, covering buffs and whatnots, and other fun content as well. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Alright, and a peace out.